Hello, biologists. Let's get started on Chapter 3, Molecules. In the chemistry chapter Chapter 2, we discussed bonds and atoms making bonds, and when they do so, they make molecules. And that's going to be important for life. We're going one step bigger. These molecules are going to help us do all the functions of our cells. Okay, so our cells are mostly water. The rest of the cell is going to be these carbon-based molecules. Generally, you're going to have what's called like a carbon backbone, where you'll have carbons connected together, and then they'll have different molecules coming off of it. Organic chemistry is the study of these carbon or organic molecules. Those are everything that have a carbon in them, except you don't include carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide. Okay, so carbon we looked at. Their carbon's outer shell has 4 out of 8 valence electrons. So it needs 4 more. So it makes 4 bonds. And the fact that it makes 4 bonds means that it can make really complex molecules. That's going to be important for life. It's going to do covalent bonds with hydrogen atoms. Those are going to share. The electrons are going to go between the hydrogen and the carbon. Okay, here's some different examples of carbon backbones. So you've got carbons attached to each other. You have usually lots of hydrogens with it. You can have double bonds to the carbon, and that can like kink it, change the structure slightly. And you can have ring-based carbons, like steroids. If you have a molecule that only has hydrogens and carbons, that's a hydrocarbon. Like for the example methane, C1C, H4, CH4. You can see it right here. So that makes really good gasoline. The carbon bonds are really full of energy. We can use them to make energy to power our cells. Okay, and depending on what atoms we have put together, they're going to give the molecule different shapes. So for example, you can see a molecule here. Different shapes give it different functions. So like anatomy and physiology, we talk about how the anatomy, the structure of something, determines the physiology, how it functions. That's true even down to the molecular level. What it looks like determines what it's going to do. So for example, here we have like neurons, and they're sending neurotransmitters. And those match up with these receptors, and they fit in there. You can see how that little red molecule would fit in that space there. They're able to communicate with these molecules. When that binds to the receptor, it makes a change in the cell. So that could also be like hormones in our body, making changes. And the molecules of our body, they recognize each other based on their shapes. Hormones that make different changes in different parts of our bodies. The cells where they make changes have receptors that fit the hormones. Okay, so organic molecules, you've got carbons, you've got hydrogens, you've also got other things attached there. And the general name for those other things are either called R groups or functional groups. So like in a hydroxyl, OH, you've got an alcohol there. Carbonyl groups, you can have like a double bond with an oxygen. In the middle, like a ketone or an aldehyde where it's on the outside. Those will be in like sugars. You can also have amino groups with nitrogen and carboxylic acids, so a double bond with an oxygen and an alcohol in the end. Those are all going to change the function, shape of the carbon-based molecule. Generally, you don't have these small molecules working very often. Usually you have what are called macromolecules. Macro, big. Macroscopic, something you can see with your eyes. There, you've got lots of little pieces put together, and they make these really big macromolecules. The different types of organic molecules are going to be macromolecules. So proteins, DNA, RNA, these nucleic acids, lipids, fats, and carbohydrates, sugars. And how you make these macromolecules is they're polymers, poly many. So you've got many little pieces put together. The individual pieces are called monomers. Mono is one. So you keep adding monomers together to make a really long chain. For example, like think about if you've got like little kernels of popcorn that you're stringing together, each of those would be a monomer, and when you've got a long string of them together, you've got this polymer. And how you add those together is a process called dehydration synthesis. So what that does is dehydration, it takes out a water, and synthesis means building. So you build a bond by removing a water. So this shows a monomer adding together to make a polymer. Here's dehydration synthesis. So you've got a monomer and a short polymer. We're going to add these together. You remove this H2O and you've built a bond. If we break those bonds, we need water to be put in to make those same ends that were there before. That's called hydrolysis. Hydro, water, lysis, breakdown. So breaking down by using water. There are 4 types of organic molecules, and we're going to look at each of those in turn. Carbohydrates, sugars, lipids, fats, proteins, and nucleic acids. So carbohydrates are sugars. You have small sugars like those little monomers, and then you've got large polymers like starch, glycogen, for example. Look at each of those. You can see here there's these long sugars that are on the outside of our cells that tell our cells that we're us. They mark it as self. So our immune cells will go around looking and seeing if we have the right sugars, and if they find cells without it, they take them out. Okay, mono, one saccharide sugar, one sugar. So those are little individual sugars. So like glucose and fructose. High fructose corn syrup, that's fructose. It's very, very sweet. We love it. Those are going to have a formula where CH2O times X. So what that means is for every carbon you have, you're going to have 2 hydrogens and an oxygen. So if you have a 5-carbon sugar, you've got 5 carbons, 10 hydrogens, and 5 oxygens. Glucose is C6H12O6. You have twice as many hydrogens as carbons and oxygens. Okay, so here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons. C6, if you count the H's, you'll have 12, H12, and 6 oxygen. C6H12O6. And glucose and fructose are actually what are called isomers. So they have the exact same formula, C6H12O6. But their atoms are rearranged in different ways. So in glucose, the double bond with the oxygen is on that first carbon, whereas in fructose, it's in a second. So isomers have the same formula, but they look different. So sometimes when we do reactions, we'll just move things around in the molecule. We won't add or subtract. And what happens when those get in water is that we form this lovely ring structure. And when you usually don't show carbons or hydrogens in like a structures view. So this would be what the abbreviated structure looks like. So this is a lovely sugar. Our cells need them. We're constantly moving it through our blood, monitoring the levels in there with our pancreas and our hormones there, insulin and glucagon, so that our cells can get glucose to make energy. So we looked at monosaccharides, 1 sugar. Now we're going to look at disaccharides. Di means 2. So there you've got 2 monomers put together. So a glucose plus a glucose equals maltose. Another example would be lactose, sugar in milk. That's a disaccharide. And people who are lactose intolerant, they can't break the bond between the 2 sugars. And to get those sugars from our digestive tract to the rest of our body, we need to break them down into the individual units. If you can't break down lactose, that keeps going through your intestines, and the bacteria in your colon really loves it. It uses it, breaks it down, makes all sorts of gases, and makes the lactose intolerant person very uncomfortable. And that's because they couldn't break this down to absorb it into their body. Most commonly, sucrose. So you've got a glucose and a fructose. You can get those from sugarcane. And so what they do is they'll put the sugarcane in and squish it down through these different layers and boil it so that we get glucose. And Americans eat lots and lots of sugar. Look at this. That's 45 kilograms of sugar that the average American eats in a year. That's 99 pounds. Our complex carbohydrates, these really, really long chains, are called polysaccharides, right? Poly, many. So you put together these monomers, these individual monosaccharides, bind them together through dehydration synthesis. We build these bonds and we make these really long molecules. So you've got starch, like in potatoes. Glycogen, that's how animals store energy, so in our muscles. And cellulose, those will be in plant cell walls, like woody plant material. We generally can't digest this very well. Yep. Here we've got a plant cell. They've got these rigid cell walls. Inside there you can see the potato cells have starch. These grains, these vacuoles that hold them in there. Plants use them to store energy. So whenever they use the sunlight, they do photosynthesis, they make energy. They make these long lengths so that when they're low, they can use it and their cells can break it down to do all the functions that their cell needs to do. Animals, they don't store it as starch, they store it as glycogen. So these are in your liver. Well, that's where you store your glycogen. Right here. We've got our hepatocytes, our liver cells, these spaces where they're doing all their functions, filtering our blood, making bile. And they also store glycogen. So if your blood sugar gets low, hormones will be released to tell the liver to release more glucose. And then cellulose, actually the most abundant organic compound on Earth. It's got these really tough fibers. It's dietary fiber. And then most animals, we can't break it down. And how do animals survive on a diet like that? They have bacteria that can break it down. So cows have multiple stomachs. They break things down and send them back up. They're called foregut fermenters. So they break it down in the front part of their stomach. Rabbits, for example, are hindgut fermenters. So what they do is when they eat food for the first time, they can't get many nutrients out of it at all. The bacteria that break things down are right at the end of their digestive tract. So when they defecate, they've got these little balls of lots of broken down nutrients. So what they'll do is they'll eat their own feces and then they'll get the nutrients that they need. One of the most important characteristics of each organic molecule is how it interacts with water. So sugars, the smaller sugars, they dissolve really well in water. They're called hydrophilic. Phil means love, so water loving. They dissolve, they've got a little bit of charge there. They are soluble in water. Longer sugars like starches, they don't dissolve as well. And then lipids, fats, are hydrophobic, water-fearing. They don't mix with water at all. So fats, steroids are like a circle, like a ring of fat. So you can see here there's oil on top of water. They don't mix together. That's because that oil all sticks together because it's water-fearing. It's attracted to itself and repelled by water. You've got this waxy cuticle on the leaf. You can see water just going on the outside and not going in. it helps keep water in the plant.